The loudest screams are the ones no one hears. That's right, my friends. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever say is nothing at all. Silence isn't weakness. It isn't avoidance. It isn't you giving up. No, silence is the storm that doesn't make a sound, the earthquake that shakes the ground beneath them without warning. And when you master it, you become untouchable. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because once you understand this truth, you'll never fight the same way again. Hey folks, imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a boxing ring. Your opponent has been training for weeks to fight you. They've studied your moves, predicted your punches, rehearsed every counterattack. The bell rings, and you just step out of the ring. You don't fight. You don't even look back. Suddenly, all their preparation means nothing. Their energy has nowhere to land. That's exactly what silence does to people who betray you. It robs them of the fight they were counting on. Here's the lie most of us grow up believing. If you don't respond, you lose. If you don't defend yourself, they win. If you don't shout your truth from the rooftops, you'll be forgotten. But my friends, that's not truth. That's bait. People who hurt you want you to react. Because every word you speak, every emotion you spill, gives them more access to your energy. They're not after your explanation, they're after your control. It's like giving the thief who just robbed your house a tour of what they missed. You're not protecting yourself, you're showing them where the valuables are. The moment you stop talking, stop explaining, stop justifying, the robbery ends. They're left outside, empty-handed, wondering what just happened. You see, toxic people live for noise. Noise distracts them from themselves. If there's chaos, they don't have to feel their guilt. If there's drama, they don't have to think about what they did. If you're busy defending yourself, they can keep pretending they're the victim. But when you go quiet, oh, that's when the fun begins, because silence is the mirror they can't smash. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who did the injury." And in today's world, where everyone is screaming to be heard, the one who masters calm becomes the most dangerous person in the room. You're not giving them a reaction, you're giving them reflection. And trust me, folks, they won't like what they see. It's funny in a way. You can watch them try to pretend they're unbothered. They'll post pictures, laugh louder, act like they've moved on. But watch closely, it's performance. Because the truth is, when someone loses access to your energy, it's like losing oxygen. They'll gasp for attention, even from strangers, because they can't get it from you anymore. And every day you stay silent, that craving gets worse. So the next time someone betrays you, remember this. Your silence is not a sign that they've won. It's proof that you've already left the battlefield and built a castle somewhere they can't reach. You're not retreating, you're upgrading. You're moving from the noise of their storm to the stillness of your own strength. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to go deep into why your silence can make them feel everything they tried to avoid, and why it's the ultimate Stoic strategy for winning without saying a single word. Write this in the comments. My silence is power. Say it to yourself, show it to the world around you, and remember, hit that like button, subscribe, and keep building your quiet strength. Because, folks, the day you stop reacting is the day you start winning. Number 1, they expected noise. Some people don't fear your anger, they feed on it. That's the truth they'll never tell you, my friends. When they hurt you, when they betrayed you, they weren't just expecting a reaction, they were counting on it. They wanted to hear your voice crack. They wanted to see your hands shake. They wanted to watch you fall apart because in their mind, your collapse would prove they were right to do what they did. It would confirm the story they've been telling themselves, that you were unstable, over-emotional, or too sensitive to handle the truth. They weren't afraid of your rage, they were banking on it. Imagine a chess player who plans 10 moves ahead, convinced they know exactly how you'll respond. They've set up traps. They've left you only one path forward, and then, when it's your turn, you pick up your king and walk off the board. You don't play their game. You don't even explain why. You leave them sitting there, staring at their perfectly set-up strategy, with no one left to play against. That's the power of not giving them the reaction they expect. It leaves them stranded in the middle of their own plan. They expect noise because noise is their language. They don't know how to function without it. In their world, silence is weakness. They think if you're not fighting, it's because you've lost. And maybe part of you believes that too. Maybe you've been told your whole life that if you don't defend yourself, people will believe the lies about you. That's the fear they want you to live in, that silence will erase you. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't erase you. It defines you. It draws a clear, unshakable line between your peace and their chaos. Why do they expect noise from you? Because that's what they would do. People who thrive in dysfunction can't imagine walking away without creating a scene. They can't fathom keeping their mouth shut when there's a chance to throw one last jab, get one last word in, or make sure the room hears their side. They think everyone thinks like them, and when you don't, when you stay calm, that calmness isn't just unexpected, it's unnerving. It's like being in a dark room where you're expecting thunder, but instead, all you get is silence. You start to imagine things. You start to feel the walls closing in. Your mind starts creating noises that aren't even there. That's exactly what happens to them when you don't react. They start hearing echoes of their own actions over and over because your silence forces them to replay everything in their head. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's exactly what you're doing when you refuse to give them what they want. You're not controlling them, you're controlling yourself. You're showing them they no longer have a key to your emotions. And that is devastating to someone who's been living off your reactions. Of course, my friends, this is easier said than done, because your instincts will fight you on this. Your pride will whisper, "Say something, don't let them have the last word." Your fear will tell you, if you don't speak, they'll think you're guilty. And your wounded heart will scream, "Make them understand what they did to you." Those voices are loud, and they'll pull at you in every direction. But here's the thing. Those voices aren't the voice of your higher self. They're the voice of your ego, and your ego will happily drag you back into the very chaos you've been trying to escape. The moment you react, you step back into their arena. And once you're in their arena, they control the rules. They twist your words. They twist your tone. They twist your intentions. And suddenly, you're not the victim anymore. You're the problem. That's why the quiet path is harder. It's not because you're weak. It's because you're strong enough to resist the trap. Think about it. If they expected you to scream, cry, or beg, and instead you walked away with nothing but calm, what does that say? It says you're not dependent on their approval anymore. It says you're not interested in their game. It says you've moved on to something better, and you didn't even need to announce it. And that's the part they'll never admit, that your silence is a message they can't argue with. You're not just avoiding a fight, you're cutting off their fuel supply. Without your reactions, their fire burns out. Without your words, their story has holes. Without your presence, their need for control has nowhere to land. And over time, that emptiness doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it becomes unbearable. I want you to see this clearly, folks. The reason they expect noise is because noise keeps them safe from themselves. If you're busy making noise, they can keep running from their own reflection. But if you go silent, now it's just them and the truth. No distractions, no scapegoats, no shield. That's why silence feels like punishment to someone who thrives in chaos, because it strips away everything they hide behind. So the next time you feel that urge to fire back, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this to protect my peace or to protect my pride? Your pride might win the moment, but your peace will win the war. And the war isn't with them. It's with the part of you that still thinks you need to be understood to move on. You don't. You need to be free. They expect noise, they feed on noise. They've built their entire identity around controlling noise. But the day you take that away from them is the day they start to unravel. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them hurt you. Write this in the comments right now. My calm is my power. Say it to yourself. Show it to the people around you. Let it be the armor you wear into every storm. Because once you understand this, you'll never feel the need to explain yourself to chaos again. And stay with me, because what's coming next will show you exactly how your silence turns into the mirror they can't escape, and why, no matter how hard they try, they'll never be able to break it. Number 2, the mirror they can't escape. The most dangerous mirror is the one that doesn't lie. That's what your silence becomes, my friends, not just an absence of words, but a reflection so clear, so sharp, it forces them to see exactly who they are without the blur of your emotions clouding the image. When you go quiet, you're not just walking away, you're holding up a mirror they've been running from their entire life. And unlike the one hanging in their bathroom, this mirror doesn't show their hair, their clothes, their practiced smile. It shows their character, their choices, the consequences they thought they could avoid. Imagine this. Someone's been walking around for years with a smudge on their face, a dark streak they can't see because no one's dared to point it out. They've surrounded themselves with people who either don't notice or are too afraid to say anything. And then one day you silently hand them a mirror. No lecture, no pointing, no "I told you so." Just, here, look. That's what your silence does. It removes the noise, the distractions, the excuses, and what's left is them, raw and unfiltered. Here's the truth they'll never say out loud. As long as you were reacting, you were protecting them. Yes, protecting them. Every time you argued back, every time you tried to explain, every time you got emotional, you gave them something to focus on other than themselves. They could point at you and say, "See? Look how dramatic they are. Look how angry. Look how unstable." Your reactions became their camouflage. But when you went silent, you stripped that camouflage away. Now there's nothing between them and the truth of what they did. And that's a terrifying place for them to be. Because here's what most people will never admit. It's not the judgment of others they fear the most. It's their own. When the lights go out at night, when the phone is down and the TV is off, when there's no one around to distract them, they hear it. That quiet voice that says, "You know you were wrong." And no matter how much they try to drown it with noise, that voice doesn't leave. Silence makes it louder. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Your silence is exactly that. It's you being the person you said you were without having to prove it. You don't need to argue about what's right. You don't need to defend your integrity. You just live it. And while you're living it, they're sitting there, stuck with the knowledge that they fell short, not by your standards, but by their own. The mirror your silence creates doesn't flatter them. It doesn't filter the flaws. It doesn't smooth over the cracks. It shows them every selfish choice, every manipulative move, every careless word. And because you're no longer there to interrupt their thoughts with your voice, all they hear are their own. Over time, those thoughts don't just sting, they scar. Here's where it gets interesting, folks. At first, they might try to dodge the mirror. They'll distract themselves with new people, new projects, new performances of happiness. They might even convince themselves they've moved on, but every performance has an intermission, and in the quiet moments when no one's watching, they'll feel it, that uncomfortable awareness creeping back in. They'll see flashes of themselves in situations that remind them of you, a boundary they cross with someone else, a lie they tell that sounds too familiar. And in those moments the mirror appears again, uninvited, unbreakable. That's why your silence is so unsettling to them. It's not just a lack of contact, it's a constant, invisible reminder. You may be gone from their life, but you've become a part of their conscience. And here's the thing about conscience. It doesn't care about timing. It will show up months later, years later, in the middle of a new relationship, in the middle of a celebration, in the middle of a night's sleep. And it will whisper, remember? You're not haunting them out of spite. You're haunting them with truth. And that truth is this. You were the mirror that once showed them their potential, their better self. But instead of rising to it, they broke it. And now, all they're left with is the jagged reflection of what they've done. I know some of you are thinking, but won't they just ignore it? Won't they just keep blaming me? And yes, at first, they will. Blame is easier than self-reflection. It's the emotional equivalent of covering the mirror with a sheet. But that sheet doesn't stay in place forever. It slips. A comment from a friend, a failed relationship, a situation that plays out exactly like the one they had with you. And suddenly, the sheet's gone, and there's the mirror again, staring them in the face. This is why silence is so much more powerful than any argument. Arguments can be twisted, words can be taken out of context, stories can be rewritten. But the image in the mirror, they can't rewrite that. They can't unsee it. And every time they try to convince themselves you were the problem, something in that reflection pushes back, saying, no, you know the truth. It's like standing in front of a still pond. When the water is calm, it reflects everything above it perfectly. That's what your silence is, calm water. When you were reacting, the water was rippling, distorted, easy for them to dismiss. But now it's still, now it's honest, now it's undeniable. And yes, my friends, holding that stillness takes strength. It takes discipline not to throw a stone into the pond just to make the reflection go away. Because your instincts will scream at you to defend yourself, to shatter the mirror they're staring into. But that's not your job anymore. Your job is to maintain the stillness. Not for them, but for you. In time, they will feel the full weight of that mirror. They will remember the conversations where you gave them chances to be better. They will remember the patience you showed. They will remember the loyalty they took for granted. And they will realize they're not just missing you. They're missing the version of themselves they were capable of becoming with you in their life. That's why I tell you, don't be afraid of the silence. Don't be afraid of what they'll think or say about it. Your silence is the final proof of who you are. And if they can't handle the reflection, that's not your burden to carry. Write this in the comments. My silence is their mirror. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world around you. Because once you understand that you are no longer their emotional shield, no longer their distraction, no longer their excuse, you'll realize you've given them the one thing they can't escape, themselves. And stay with me, because next we're going to break down why this silence isn't passive at all, why it's actually a calculated, unstoppable psychological strategy that dismantles their control from the inside out. Number 3. Silence as psychological strategy. Never waste your energy fighting battles that collapse on their own. That, my friends, is exactly what silence does. It doesn't just remove you from the fight, it removes you from their control. And that's why it's not weakness, it's strategy. This isn't you standing there helpless while they win. This is you stepping out of their trap and letting the walls close in on them instead. You're not walking away because you can't fight. You're walking away because you know you don't need to. Think about it like this. You're in a tug of war. They're pulling with all their strength, straining, gritting their teeth, sweating, determined to drag you across the line. And you? You simply let go of the rope. What happens? They stumble, they fall, they crash to the ground because the only way they could win was if you kept holding on. That's exactly how manipulators operate. They can't keep the game going unless you keep showing up to play. The lie they want you to believe is that silence equals surrender. If you're not responding, you've lost. If you're not defending yourself, you've been defeated. That's what they hope you'll think, because that fear is what pulls you back into their arena. But the truth? Silence is choosing your battlefield. It's refusing to fight where they're strongest, in drama, chaos, and emotional manipulation, and instead forcing them to fight where they're weakest, in the quiet. Because here's the thing, folks, silence changes the rules. In chaos, they control the tempo. In noise, they control the story. But in stillness, they're out of their element. They can't read you, they can't predict you, they can't twist what you haven't said. They're like a boxer who trained for months for a fight and finds out the ring is empty. And don't get me wrong, this isn't easy. Staying silent when every nerve in your body wants to respond takes more strength than firing off the perfect comeback. It's not about ignoring them because you're scared. It's about ignoring them because you see the bigger picture. You're not interested in winning the moment. You're interested in winning the long game. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike him who did the injury. And that's the essence of this strategy. You don't respond like them. You don't descend into the same pettiness, the same manipulation, the same noise. You remove yourself from their energy entirely because you know once you're gone, their game starts falling apart. Picture this, a puppeteer on a stage, masterfully moving their marionette. The audience is impressed, the strings are invisible, the control is absolute. But then the puppet cuts the strings. The puppeteer can flail their hands all they want, but nothing moves. The show's over, and everyone can see it. That's what happens when you go silent. The moment you stop reacting, you've cut the strings. They can pull, they can tug, they can shout from the stage, but you're no longer attached. And here's why this works so deeply on a psychological level, because manipulators depend on feedback loops. They do something to you, you react, they adjust based on that reaction, and the cycle continues. When you take away your reaction, you've broken the loop. They can't test your emotions, they can't adjust their tactics, and they can't maintain control. They're left in the dark, and people who rely on manipulation hate the dark. Now here's where it gets interesting. Silence doesn't just protect you, it exposes them. Without your voice to drown it out, their behavior becomes much more visible to others. It's like turning down the volume on a blaring radio and suddenly realizing the room is a mess. When you're not constantly defending yourself, the people around them start to notice the truth. They see the patterns, they see the contradictions, they see that maybe you weren't the problem after all. Some of you might be thinking, but won't they just spin a story to make themselves look good? Sure, they'll try. But here's the thing. Stories need an audience, and the more you stay silent, the more they start repeating themselves. And the more they repeat themselves, the more obvious it becomes that they're obsessed with someone who isn't even talking about them anymore. Nothing exposes insecurity like someone who can't stop talking about a person who's completely silent. Silence is also the ultimate energy conservation. Let's be real, defending yourself takes energy. Explaining your side takes energy. Proving your worth to someone who already decided to devalue you. That takes the most energy of all. And for what? To convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced? To gain closure from someone who's incapable of giving it? No, my friends. That energy is better spent building your own life, your own peace, your own happiness. Because every moment you don't waste on them is a moment you invest in yourself. It's also a test of your own discipline. Anyone can get angry. Anyone can shout. Anyone can post a rant online. But to sit in your power, knowing you could speak but choosing not to, that's mastery. That's control. And the thing about people who hurt you is this. They expect you to be predictable. They expect you to react. They plan for it. But when you break that pattern, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is intimidating. Think of a game of cards. They think they've read your hand. They've seen you play certain cards before, and they're counting on you to do it again. But this time, you keep your cards close. You don't play. You don't even look like you're in the game anymore. Now they're left second-guessing every move, wondering if you're holding the card that could end it all. That uncertainty eats at them far more than any angry words ever could. This is why silence isn't passive. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing something different. It's about pulling your energy out of the system they've been feeding on and letting them deal with the emptiness that follows. And trust me, they will feel it. They may not show it right away. They may act unbothered. But the absence of your reaction will gnaw at them because it denies them the control they once had. And here's the part they'll never admit. Your silence forces them to deal with themselves. Without you to blame, without you to provoke, without you to distract them, they have to sit with the truth of who they are. And for some people, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. So don't think of silence as backing down. Think of it as stepping aside and letting their own momentum carry them into the consequences they were trying to avoid. You're not blocking the punch. You're letting them swing so hard they throw themselves off balance. That's strategy. That's control. That's the quiet kind of power they never saw coming. Write this in the comments. Silence is my strategy. Let it be your reminder that you're not doing nothing. You're doing the smartest thing you could possibly do. Because when you take away their ability to play the game, you've already won. And stay with me, because next we're going to talk about projection collapse. That delicious moment when their carefully crafted lies about you start to fall apart because you stopped feeding them the reactions they needed to survive. And trust me, folks, that's where the real unraveling begins. Number 4, projection collapse. When someone can no longer use your voice, they're forced to face their own. This, my friends, is where the game they've been playing starts to crumble in their own hands. Projection collapse isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or a dramatic ending. It's slow, like a leak in a ship they swore was unsinkable, and it starts the moment you stop giving them the reaction they need to keep their story alive. Let's get real. Toxic people survive on projection. It's their favorite tool. They take their own flaws, their own insecurities, their own failures, and they paste them onto you like a sticker they hope will stick forever. If they lie, they'll call you dishonest. If they're selfish, they'll say you only think about yourself. If they betray, they'll insist you can't be trusted. It's a magic trick they've been perfecting for years. I'm not the problem, you are. And you know what keeps that magic trick alive? Your reaction. Every time you defend yourself, every time you argue, every time you try to explain, you're feeding their illusion. You're playing the role they wrote for you. They accuse, you respond. They twist your words. You try to untwist them. They throw dirt. You wipe it off in front of them, proving they had dirt to throw in the first place. But then one day you stop. No counterattack, no angry text, no long voice message pouring your heart out. Just nothing. And suddenly, their favorite game doesn't work anymore. Imagine a ventriloquist on stage, holding a puppet in their hands. The audience is laughing, clapping, enjoying the show. But here's the secret. It only works if the puppet keeps moving. Now imagine the puppet just goes limp. The ventriloquist can keep talking, but the act falls apart. The illusion is broken. That's what happens when you go silent. You take away their ability to animate the story they've been telling about you. At first, they'll panic. Oh, they won't show it. They'll act like they're fine. They'll pretend your absence is meaningless. But behind that performance, they're scrambling. Their projection needs proof to survive. And without you giving them that proof, they're left trying to convince people with nothing but their own words. And here's the thing about lies. Without evidence, they start to sound hollow. Projection collapse is beautiful because it flips the pressure back onto them. They've been living in a reality where you carried the burden of proof. You were always defending yourself, always trying to show you weren't who they said you were. But now they have to carry that burden alone. And when people start asking questions, why do you keep bringing them up? Why are you so fixated on someone who's not even around anymore? They don't have good answers. Silence also breaks the feedback loop they rely on for self-justification. You see, when they provoke you and you react, they can tell themselves, "See, that's why I did what I did. That's proof I was right." But when you stop reacting, there's nothing left for them to point to. All they have is the uncomfortable awareness that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong all along. And let's be honest, people who live in projection don't do well when the mirror turns inward. They've spent years avoiding it. They've built an entire identity around being the victim, the hero, or the one who was forced to act a certain way because of you. When you take yourself out of the story, they're forced to rewrite it. And rewriting it means facing chapters they've never wanted to read. Here's a truth they'll never admit. Your silence is humiliating to them. Not because you're trying to humiliate them, but because it exposes the fact that they never had the control they thought they did. They were banking on you breaking down, chasing them, proving them right. But instead, you disappeared. You took away their script. You removed the stage lights. Now, they're just a performer with no audience. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And when you stop responding to lies, you're living that principle. You're no longer engaging with falsehood. You're no longer fighting battles that never should have existed in the first place. You're letting their own words turn in on themselves. Of course, projection collapse isn't instant. They'll try to rebuild it. They'll tell anyone who will listen their version of events. They might even provoke you indirectly, hoping you'll break the silence. They'll post things online meant for you to see. They'll drop your name in conversations, pretending it's casual. All of it is bait, desperate attempts to pull you back into the role they need you to play. And this is where your discipline matters most, because the moment you break, the moment you give them a reaction, they'll grab it with both hands and use it to rebuild their false reality. But if you hold your ground, if you stay silent, the cracks in their story get wider. And the wider those cracks get, the harder it is for anyone, even themselves, to believe it. Projection collapse also works on a deeper psychological level. Without your cooperation, they start to lose their grip on the identity they've built. If their self-worth is tied to being better than you, what happens when you stop playing the game? If their confidence comes from making you look bad, what happens when you're no longer around to compare themselves to? They're forced to face the possibility that they don't know who they are without you. Think of it like a shadow. A shadow only exists if there's something to block the light. If you step out of the way, the shadow disappears. Your silence removes the shape they've been defining themselves against. And that absence doesn't just feel empty to them, it feels like an identity crisis. Now, here's the part that's both poetic and powerful. While their projection is collapsing, your reality is growing stronger. You're no longer wasting energy defending yourself. You're investing that energy into becoming the version of yourself they never believed you could be. And the more you grow, the more obvious the gap becomes between the truth of who you are and the lie they tried to tell. People will notice. Even if they don't say it out loud, they'll see that your life is moving forward while the other person seems stuck, still talking about you. They'll see that your peace doesn't match the picture that was painted of you. And over time, the truth has a way of speaking for itself. That's the beauty of projection collapse. You don't have to force it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to stop participating in the lie, and eventually the lie can't stand on its own. So, my friends, the next time someone tries to bait you into defending yourself against a version of you that doesn't even exist, remember this. You don't have to show up to every fight you're invited to. Sometimes the smartest move you can make is to stay quiet, let them talk, and watch as their own words do the work for you. Write this in the comments. I refuse to play their role. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world. Because the moment you stop feeding their story, you start writing your own. And that's a story they can't touch. And stay with me. Because next, we're stepping into the human side of this with a real-life parallel. One that will show you exactly how silence doesn't just protect you, but shifts the entire power dynamic in a way they never saw coming. Number 5. Real-life parallel, the unanswered message. Sometimes the loudest answer is the one you never send. Let me take you into this one, my friends, because it's the kind of story that stays with you. It's not explosive, it's not dramatic in the way you'd expect, but it's sharp, the kind of sharp that cuts without a sound. There was a man who had spent years in a relationship with a woman who gave him nothing but loyalty, patience, and grace. She was the type who stayed up late to listen when he was struggling. She forgave the little betrayals, the broken promises, the casual neglect, because she believed in the bigger picture. She believed in him. But as it often goes with people who take goodness for granted, he mistook her patience for weakness. One day, he crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Lies came first, then blame. And finally, the betrayal, the kind that changes how you see someone forever. And what did he expect? He expected tears, shouting, demands for answers. He expected her to beg for the truth, to hold on to him just a little longer. That's how their dynamic had always worked. He would break something, and she would come running to fix it. But this time, she didn't run. Days later, he sent her a long message, not an apology. No, a justification. Paragraph after paragraph explaining why she had pushed him into what he'd done. Every sentence was a subtle twist, a reframing of reality to paint himself as the one who had been wronged, and he hit send with the smug satisfaction of a man who thought he'd just regained control of the story. Except, she never replied. Not a word, not an emoji, not even a seen notification. The message sat there, blue-ticked but unanswered, hanging in the air like smoke that refuses to fade. At first he told himself she just needed time. Then he thought maybe she was too hurt to speak. But as the hours turned to days and the days into weeks, the silence stopped feeling like a pause and started feeling like a wall. And here's the thing about walls. They don't just keep people out. They trap you in. In her silence, he found himself trapped with only one companion, the truth. Every excuse he had typed out, every sentence designed to twist the knife back into her, now turned on him. He read his own words over and over, and for the first time they didn't sound convincing. Without her emotional reaction to push against, they sounded hollow, even to him. It's funny how projection works when it has nothing to bounce off of. Without her defending herself, without her giving him a reaction, his justifications started to collapse in his own hands. He began to see the lies for what they were, not because she called them lies, but because her silence left them standing in the light, naked, without the cover of conflict. Weeks later, he sent another message. This time it was softer, less blaming, more nostalgia. "I was thinking about that night we stayed up talking until sunrise," he wrote. "Do you ever miss it?" And again, nothing. No reply. No entry point. Just silence. Months went by, and the messages kept coming, each one shorter, more hesitant. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Saw something that reminded me of you." She never replied, and every time he saw his own unanswered words in the chat history, the reality sank in deeper. He was no longer part of her life, not in the way that mattered, not in the way he'd taken for granted. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't just end conversations, it rewrites them. When someone refuses to respond, the meaning of every word you said shifts. What once felt like control starts to feel like exposure. What once felt like power begins to taste like regret. This man, over the years, told friends about her. Sometimes he painted her as cold, distant, other times as the one who got away. But no matter what he said out loud, in his mind he always came back to the same thought. If she had yelled, I could have argued back. If she had cried, I could have comforted her. If she had begged, I could have denied her. But she gave me nothing, and that's what I can't get over. And folks, that's exactly why this real-life example is so powerful. Silence in the face of betrayal isn't passive. It's the most active choice you can make. It's not avoidance. It's a deliberate refusal to give someone the tools they need to keep rewriting the truth. When she chose not to reply, she wasn't just ignoring a message. She was sending her own, one he couldn't twist, couldn't manipulate, couldn't use as evidence against her. She was saying, without saying, I'm done playing your game. I'm done explaining myself to you. I'm done being the mirror you use to avoid looking at yourself. And here's where it gets even deeper. Her silence didn't just protect her peace. It dismantled his narrative. Slowly, over time, he stopped telling the story in public because every time he did, someone would ask, "Have you spoken to her?" And all he could say was, "No." That no carried more weight than any explanation she could have given, because people start to notice, if she's really as wrong as you say she is, why hasn't she tried to defend herself? Why hasn't she said anything? That's the brilliance of this kind of silence. It forces the other person to be solely responsible for the story they tell. And when they're left alone with it, without opposition, without someone to push back, the cracks start to show. They repeat themselves too much. They over-explain. They sound less certain. Because deep down, they know they're speaking into an empty space. And the only echo they hear is their own voice. This woman never had to block him, never had to post cryptic quotes on social media, never had to prove she was over it. Her life became the proof, and over time that was the part that really got to him. She moved on, visibly, fully, without a backward glance. And every time he saw her living, smiling, thriving without his presence, it reminded him of the one thing his words could never erase. She had the power to walk away, and she took it. You see, folks, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the creation of space. Space for them to hear themselves. Space for you to heal. space for the truth to stand on its own. And the beauty of it is that in that space, everything they tried to bury starts to rise to the surface. Not because you dug it up, but because without you to carry it, it was always theirs to begin with. So when you think about your own situation, when you're tempted to fire back a text, to send that long message, to defend yourself one more time, I want you to remember this story. Remember how she never replied, and how that unanswered message became his loudest memory of her. Remember how every word he sent only made her silence louder. And remember that you have that same power. Write this in the comments. No reply is my reply. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world around you that you don't need to shout to be heard. And stay with me, because next we're going to dive into the internal collapse, the quiet storm that starts inside them when your silence finally sinks in, and they realize they're alone with the very truth they tried to avoid. Number 6, the internal collapse. The loudest storms are the ones that start inside. That's exactly what happens, my friends, when your silence finally settles in. It's not immediate. At first, they'll pretend it doesn't matter. They'll puff their chest, post their pictures, laugh louder, keep moving like your absence is just another Tuesday. But here's the thing about internal collapse. It doesn't happen on the surface. It happens slowly, under the skin, in the spaces they can't fill with noise. It's like watching a building that looks perfectly fine from the outside. Fresh paint, lights on, people walking in and out. But what you don't see is the rot in the beams, the cracks in the foundation, the weight quietly pulling everything down. That's what your silence becomes. Not a wrecking ball from the outside, but a quiet decay on the inside that starts the moment they realize they've lost your participation. Here's the truth most people will never admit. When someone betrays you, they're not always looking to destroy you. Sometimes they're just looking to prove to themselves that they could live without you. But when you stay silent, when you give them no closure, no emotional tether, no thread to pull on, they get exactly what they said they wanted, and it terrifies them. Because now they have to actually live in it. At first, they'll distract themselves. New people, new projects, new routines. They'll try to bury the gap you left with busyness, but busyness is like putting furniture over a crack in the floor. It hides the problem, it doesn't fix it, and the longer they avoid it, the bigger that crack gets. That's why months later, out of nowhere, they'll remember the way you used to make them feel safe, the way your presence steadied their chaos, the way you didn't just listen to their words, you heard what they weren't saying. And that memory hits differently when there's no way to get it back. They'll start to feel the quiet in strange ways. Maybe it's the absence of your good morning texts. Maybe it's not having someone to vent to after a bad day. Maybe it's realizing that the people they surrounded themselves with aren't there for the hard conversations. Whatever it is, that's when the collapse begins. Not in a dramatic breakdown, but in the slow dawning that life without you feels different in all the wrong ways. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." When you walk away quietly, you revoke your participation in their chaos, and without your emotional energy to feed on, they're left with their own. And here's the secret: their own energy isn't enough to sustain them. Internal collapse isn't about guilt alone. It's about the loss of a stabilizing force. You were the quiet in their storm, and they didn't realize how much they depended on it until it was gone. Now, every small inconvenience feels bigger, every conflict feels heavier, every mistake feels more permanent, because they don't have your voice calming them down, reminding them of perspective, holding the line when they start to spiral. They'll try to fill the space you left, but it won't work. The late-night conversations with new people won't feel as deep. The comfort of your presence can't be replicated with temporary distractions. And the more they try to replace you, the more they'll realize they can't. That's the cruel irony of betrayal. They break something thinking they'll find better, but end up chasing shadows of what they lost. And here's where it starts to hurt them the most. Your silence means they can't fix it. They can't apologize their way back in. They can't argue you into opening the door. They can't bait you into another round of the same old fight. You've shut off the supply of emotional access they relied on, and now they're locked outside of the very place they used to call home. It's like standing in front of a door you used to walk through freely, only to find it bricked over. You knock, nothing. You push, nothing. You shout, still nothing. At first you get angry, then you get confused, and finally you get quiet, because deep down you know the truth. That door isn't just locked, it's gone. That's when the collapse turns inward. Without you to push against, their thoughts have nowhere to go but inside. Every justification they made for what they did starts to sound weaker. Every excuse they told themselves begins to lose its grip. The story they built about you, that you were replaceable, that you were too much, that they didn't need you, starts to fall apart. Not because you argued with them, but because you didn't. And here's the beautiful, brutal part. You didn't have to punish them. You didn't have to destroy them. You just let the truth catch up to them. And the truth always moves faster in silence. The internal collapse is the moment they realize they weren't as strong without you as they thought they'd be. It's the moment they see that losing you wasn't just losing a person. It was losing the version of themselves they could be around you. That's the kind of loss that lingers. It doesn't fade with time. It deepens, because every time they try to find it again, they're reminded they can't. You see, folks, silence isn't just about protecting your peace. It's about giving them back the weight they put on you. It's about saying, without saying, I'm not carrying this for you anymore. And when they have to carry it themselves, they feel the heaviness they've been avoiding all along. This is why they sometimes lash out long after you've gone. It's why they'll randomly try to provoke you months, even years later. They want relief from that weight, and they think pulling you back in will give it to them. But if you stay grounded, if you keep your boundary firm, all they get is the reminder that you've moved on and they haven't. So when you see them trying to act unbothered, remember, the internal collapse isn't visible to everyone. They'll hide it well. They'll hide it even from themselves. But it's there, under the surface, eating away at the story they told the world and the one they told themselves. Write this in the comments. Their collapse is not my burden. Let it be your reminder that you are not responsible for the storms they create inside themselves. You didn't cause it. Your silence just revealed it. And stay with me, because next we're going to talk about the echo effect, how your absence doesn't just stay quiet, but grows louder over time until it becomes the one sound they can't escape. Number 7. The echo effect. Some things don't fade with time, they grow louder in the silence. That, my friends, is exactly what your absence becomes for them. Not a memory that softens, not a chapter that closes, but an echo that keeps bouncing off the walls of their mind. At first, they think they can tune it out. They tell themselves they're fine. They pile on distractions, bury themselves in noise, surround themselves with people and activities to keep the quiet away. But silence is patient. It doesn't demand attention right away. It waits, and then it grows. Imagine standing at the bottom of a canyon. You shout something, maybe even something cruel. And at first, you feel powerful because your voice fills the air. But then, seconds later, the echo comes back. Your own words, thrown back at you unchanged, impossible to ignore. That's what happens when someone betrays you and you walk away without a sound. The things they said, the things they did, they come back to them in their own voice, but now they can't blame you for how it sounds. Here's the thing about echoes. They don't bring anything new. They only repeat what's already been spoken. And when you've gone silent, when you've stopped defending yourself, they're left with nothing but the echo of their own actions. At first, it's faint, just a passing thought here and there. But over time, the spaces between distractions get longer and the echo gets clearer. It can be triggered by anything, a place you once went together, a song that played in the background of a shared memory, the scent of something you used to cook. They'll be going about their day, and suddenly you're there. Not physically, not even in words, but in the feeling they can't shake, the feeling that something is missing and can't be replaced. And here's the irony. They'll try to replace you. They'll go from person to person, experience to experience, thinking they can find the same depth, the same steadiness, the same presence you gave them, but you can't replace a soul with a shadow. You can't fill the shape of something real with something hollow, and every failed attempt makes the echo louder. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Your absence becomes that obstacle in their path, not because you put it there, but because it's the shape of the life they had with you. And the more they try to walk around it, the more they're reminded it's there. Over time, the echo becomes heavier than the original sound. The regret feels sharper than the betrayal ever did. Because here's the truth. They don't miss the arguments, the conversations, or even the relationship in its entirety. What they miss is the peace they felt when you were there, the peace they didn't value until it was gone. Some of you might be thinking, but what if they really don't care? And here's my answer. Care doesn't always look like confession. Some people will never admit the impact you had on their life. Pride won't let them. But pride can't stop the echo. Even if they never speak your name again, even if they pretend you never existed, they'll feel you in moments they can't explain. The quiet ones, when no one is around to watch their performance. And this is where your power lives, folks. Not in making them hurt, not in forcing them to remember, but in knowing that your presence was so solid, so unique. It's unforgettable whether they want it to be or not. Your silence didn't erase you. It made you permanent in a way words never could. Think of it like a song that gets stuck in your head. You didn't choose it. You didn't even like it at first. But now it's there, looping in the background no matter what you do. That's you in their life, post-betrayal. The difference is they can't skip the track. They can't switch to something else. The memory plays when it wants to, and it plays in full. And here's the most poetic part. The echo doesn't just remind them of what they lost. It reminds them of who they were when they had you. Maybe they were calmer, kinder, more stable, more driven. And now, without you, they can't seem to get back to that version of themselves. That's when the echo stops being nostalgia and starts being a mirror. A reminder that they're not the same without you, and that they might never be again. The beauty of this, you don't have to do a thing to make it happen. You don't have to post for their attention, send them cryptic messages, or try to spark their memory. You simply live your life. You build your peace. You keep moving forward. And every step you take without them makes the echo just a little bit louder on their end. This is why your silence is more than a reaction. It's a statement. It says, I don't need to remind you of who I am. Life will do that for me, and trust me, it will. The universe has a way of bringing people face to face with what they didn't value. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years, but it always comes. So don't be tempted to break the silence just to remind them of your worth. That's not your job anymore. Your worth isn't in their recognition. Your worth is in the way you carry yourself, the way you rebuild, the way you keep your dignity intact when you could have thrown it all away for one last jab. Remember this: echoes last longer than the sound that made them. And when someone feels the weight of what they've lost every time the world gets quiet, that's not revenge. That's reality. That's truth doing its work without you lifting a finger. Write this in the comments: my absence speaks. Let it be the anchor you hold on to when you're tempted to explain yourself, to reach out, to make noise where there should be peace. Show yourself. Show the world around you. And if this message spoke to your soul today, hit that like button. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101 for more wisdom, strength, and clarity. And share this with someone who's learning the power of walking away. Because here, my friends, we don't just survive betrayal. We rise above it, we grow through it, and we let silence speak the truths words could never hold. Stay grounded, stay powerful, and let your echo do the rest.